And so it goes, you know. That's the long and the short of what the Goals 2000 / OBE / School to Work / Workforce 2000 legislative package is about. And it is a package. It's a package deal. It's about changing the belief system and making it easier to manipulate the future global workforce. This package is being legislated and implemented one step at a time to draw attention away from the larger agenda. In short, behavioral scientists have utilized computerization to deliver the holy grail of social engineering. Now, I'm going to digress for just a moment to touch on some background issues about the mental hygiene movement, because this was what surprised me, even though I thought I knew the gist of the matter. What I discovered was that in the 1970s, two equally unethical cadres of behavioral scientists, one calling itself behavioral eugenicists and evolutionary psychologists, and the other being essentially professional Marxist agitators, joined hands to accomplish something they each needed but for a different reason. The behavioral eugenicists, or evolutionary psychologists, as their name implies, were interested in removing defectives and cleaning up the gene pool. The term defectives, passed down from a pre-Holocaust Hitlerian era, when such ideas didn't raise a lot of eyebrows, frankly, evolved into a label that was applied not just to accidents of birth and injury, like being without an arm or a leg, but to people holding unacceptable viewpoints. They came to be seen as defective as well. You wouldn't have such ideas if there wasn't something wrong with you. If you believe in moral absolutes, you're rigid, and therefore defective. The Marxist left, on the other hand, was not at all interested in cleaning up the gene pool. They were concerned with instigating social chaos, and to accomplish that required as much illegitimacy, crime, single parenthood, consumer debt, and social isolation as possible. For that purpose, they infiltrated the university faculties and student groups and seized the bureaucracy at all levels. But both factions I've been talking about really weren't so different after all. Freedom from concepts about right and wrong, and an economy based what they call today free market socialism. I know, the term free market socialism is, of course, a contradiction in terms. But living in Washington, I hear it all the time. And it's a very revealing term if you think about it, if you couple it to a state-approved belief system that views mankind as a neurochemical accident running around, as human capital. Then that term is very revealing. So, behavioral eugenicists like Max Kalman and Linda Erlingmeyer-Kimling, who I describe in my book, joined with Marxist behaviorists like Drs. James Rawling Rees, Hilda Taba, and Ralph Tyler to introduce psychological screening instruments, that's your assessments, and experimental therapies, that's your curriculums, into the schools. They wooed computer specialists, formed testing corporations like the Educational Testing Service and Psychological Corporation, and became involved in creating a system of cross-referenceable databases, today known as electronic transfer systems. These would not only store and make accessible personal information on every family in America, but it would facilitate the business of getting into the child's belief system early on. This, of course, held out the tantalizing possibility of being able to change the course of future events. One of the early gurus of the mental health movement in America in the 1930s, a very popular guy in California by the name of Dr. Paul Popenoe, once stated that, quote, "The school should be a sieve through which all the children of the country are passed. It is very desirable," he stated, "that no child escape inspection." Wouldn't Popenoe be gratified to see the strides America has made toward this goal of turning the school into a sieve, weeding out defective personalities, or at least identifying them, and inappropriate worldviews, just as society begins to turn on its elderly, its sick, and its unborn? Today, students and their families are unknowingly assessed for supposed markers, that's their term, markers, of psychological disorders. The most recent one being to label attention deficit disorder, that's ADD, as a marker for schizophrenia. Did you know that? Even though there exists no organic dysfunction that can be identified as present in all or even most ADD-labeled individuals, this inability to focus and concentrate for protracted periods of time. That's what ADD is, the inability to focus and sustain concentration. It's been seized upon as an indicator of a far worse malady, schizophrenia. The actual cause of ADD symptoms, for the most part, is the result of those unworkable philosophies of child management I talked about earlier, made worse by toddler to teen daycare. These philosophies revolve around the child being allowed to remain overstimulated and unfocused. Daycare programs provided the first evidence that children were having trouble concentrating. Having alerted everyone to this terrible problem, daycare itself began to be hailed as a boon to successful education and socialization. But what was really happening in these overstimulating environments, and by overstimulating I mean gobs of toys everywhere, just stuff everywhere. These children were being encouraged to flip from one activity to another without ever finishing or becoming proficient at anything. And then they grow up and wonder why they can't concentrate. The daycare environment not only overstimulated the youngsters, making them alternately nervous and grumpy, and then unfocused and unresponsive, but it ensured that children spent more time with each other than they did with adults, producing what I call that Lord of the Flies mentality. That was the beginning. You may recall this famous fiction work, Lord of the Flies, in which very young children, through a freak accident, are left to make it on their own on a deserted island. Well, in the book, the nightmare result is that the youngsters establish their own norms and their own value system, creating a world in which grown-ups are essentially irrelevant. This greatly impeded the process of rational thought, what we would call mature judgment. They never established that, and it led to multiple murders of other children. Well, this work foreshadowed what's now occurring in America, don't you think? Increasingly, if the child is an independent thinker, he's viewed by educators as a loner, dogmatic, unsocialized. I've seen those as a teacher in a child's folder, cumulative folder, if he doesn't, just go along with everybody. Today, the particulars of all the various assessments, analyses, and therapies designed to locate and treat ADD students are recorded in sophisticated cross-referenceable electronic transfer systems. The main one called the Speedy Express, and that stands for a very long, it's an acronym for a very long name that I won't go into, but who gets the records? Universities, the healthcare system, insurance companies, and the workplace. What happens to the information? It's cross-referenced and overlaid with title records, medical records, pharmaceutical records, IRS records, motor vehicle records, credit records, telephone records, mail order records, purchase records, magazine and newspaper subscriptions, and so on. In fact, I got faxed to me the other day. It was an advertisement, basically. Well, not so much an advertisement, but a brochure explaining the services of something called Infotech. It was 5 pages of what they will search out for you about an individual, and it contained all of this stuff. Based on this information, you and your kids are being placed into a designated category by entities known as information brokers. That's what this service was, an information broker. It's perfectly legal. A large company in Chicago used such catchy category labels as pools and patios, shotguns and pickups, and blue blood estates to designate different categories of people. Predictions about what can be expected from you, now this is prediction, in the future, are made from the analyzed data and can be downloaded at any time for a small fee by one of these companies. And anything passing itself off as a research group can get it very easily. For this reason, information brokerage houses are big business, and I might add, again, quite legal. But there's also a huge black market underground that deals in illicit, often stolen information to which even government goes when it can't get it through legitimate legal channels. Unsurprisingly, data laundering has become a lucrative spin-off for black market brokers and potential victims. People with a bad credit rating, an extramarital affair, or maybe just a medical condition like diabetes or something, trying to get around all this electronic wizardry. Blackmail, intimidation, and harassment is now the consideration of every one of you. But the longer-term danger is that such a technological capability gives less than ethical politicians, advertisers, and educators a whole new way to change your mind. They can craft a campaign. They bombard your senses with images, stories, and other stimuli to fill up the vacuum which is devoid of any facts. In short, entire campaigns can be targeted to personality factors instead of to the intellect, completely bypassing rational thought and instead going for the gut. Today, our political leaders, like school principals and teachers, are no longer willing or possibly even able to talk about good and evil. Everything is reduced to a mental problem. Nearly every government and foundation grant program that I've seen in government aimed at preventing delinquency is grounded in the behavioral sciences. Now, predictive computer technology is moving into the curriculum itself. Children sitting in wired classrooms are open and vulnerable to a newer, more sophisticated form of brainwashing than anything we've ever known. Psychologically manipulative and politically charged materials can now be easily downloaded from satellite systems like the National Community Learning and Information Network directly into a pupil's personal computer in the classroom, and you won't know the difference. Trained psychologists can sit on the other end of this, monitoring pupil progress unobtrusively in a real Brave New World-style programmed learning environment. This is why I devote my workshop to recognizing and combating psychological manipulation. Parents must teach their children what's private and what isn't. They have to walk them through the 5 phases of indoctrination to help them avoid getting roped into groupthink. Children, of course, aren't the only ones being outmaneuvered. Parents and community members are getting trounced on task forces, curriculum committees, and in other forums designed to generate a predetermined consensus. A consensus that in the end will be presented to legislators. They'll take it to your legislators as what the community really wants. Some of these same computerized techniques I've been describing are used to select who will be on the committees. Then professional agitators, passed off as facilitators of the discussion, go in and do a job on the group. Only an hour or so after leaving the meeting, do some people say, gee, you know, I didn't really approve of that. Education policies, and indeed all our social policy making today, is directed toward the negligent, irresponsible, and abusive individual instead of to the backbone of society, upstanding, decent, and honorable citizens like yourselves. Young parents don't realize this is an enormous shift in priorities from the pre-1940s era, when people knew what was right and what was wrong. It doesn't take a psychiatrist, or for that matter a priest, to figure out that youngsters who are allowed to spend the largest part of their days acting out fantasies, who are drilled with anti-authoritarian theology, and who can get easy A's under phony standards, are eventually going to unleash an environment of social chaos. In closing, General George S. Patton once commented that the meaning of success is how high you bounce when you hit bottom. You know, I think we need to breathe new life into that definition and hold our counterculture leaders and policymakers responsible for what they've done to our children and our families. I think it means we've had enough of the same old experts daily trotted out before the television cameras, giving the same old tired lines about mental problems. It's time to insist, not request. It means getting our kids out of the public schools if we haven't already. It means starting private schools, lots of them, and insisting that the red tape be removed. In short, it means taking back our society, one community, one neighborhood at a time. Thank you very much. It's been a terrific class.
This program is from the audio archives of the Reality Zone. For more information, visit our website at www.realityzone.com or call our toll-free number, 800-595-6596. That number again is 800-595-6596. The Reality Zone is a subsidiary of American Media.